They don't miss you right away. Not like you do. Not in the same hour. Not in the same week. When you're aching, they're escaping. When you're replaying memories, they're burying them. But here's the twist. Avoidants do miss you. They just miss you later. Quietly. Secretly. And when it happens, it hits them harder than you'd ever imagine. This is the part no one tells you. And this is the part you need to hear. The silence before the ache. The story of missing someone doesn't begin with longing. It begins with silence. And for the avoidant, that silence is not just an absence of sound. It is a shield, a carefully constructed barrier between their heart and the pain they don't want to feel. When you first part ways, whether through conflict, distance, or a breakup, they do not collapse. They do not chase. They do not even allow themselves to feel the depth of what was lost. Instead, they switch off. It looks cold. It looks cruel. But what you're seeing is a nervous system in survival mode. Because intimacy, for the avoidant, has always been tied to danger. It meant pressure. It meant demands. It meant the possibility of being consumed. So when it ends, their body does not cry out for you. Their body sighs in relief. Relief that no one is watching them so closely. Relief that no one is asking them to open deeper. Relief that they no longer need to balance their fear of closeness with their desire for connection. This relief is not love lost. It is fear postponed. And this is the trap for you, the partner who loved deeply. Because while you are awake at night, turning memories into questions, searching for the moment it slipped away, they are sleeping. They are distracting themselves. They are fine. And so you think, maybe I didn't matter. Maybe I imagined the whole thing. Maybe they never loved me at all. But that's not the truth. The truth is, the avoidant has learned to delay missing you. They have learned to lock away their grief until it feels safe enough to open. And in the early days, they don't feel safe at all. So they choose numbness. They choose distraction. They choose silence. This silence can take many forms. Some fill their schedules, work late nights, join new activities. They tell themselves they're moving on. Some chase novelty, a new person, a fling, not because they've forgotten you, but because it helps them escape the depth of what they would feel if they sat still. Others withdraw entirely. They close doors. They shut off phones. They vanish. And while it looks like indifference, inside, something else is happening. Because suppression is not deletion. Every memory you shared, every laugh, every touch is still there. It doesn't disappear. It waits. The avoidant doesn't throw love away. They bury it. They tuck it deep into the ground, like a seed hidden from light. And in their silence, that seed doesn't die. It begins to press upward, slowly, quietly, until cracks begin to form in the wall they built. But here's the paradox. The moment you are most broken is often the moment they feel the most free. And the moment you begin to heal, to rise, to breathe again, is when their silence starts to ache. It is delayed grief, a slow-motion heartbreak, not because they didn't care, but because caring is terrifying. This is why understanding the silence matters. Because if you mistake it for not caring, you will chase, you will beg, you will try to force them to show emotion before their walls have cracked. And in doing so, you reinforce their fear. You confirm their belief that closeness is pressure. But if you see their silence for what it is, a defense, not a dismissal, you can understand the rhythm of their missing. They will not miss you instantly, but they will miss you eventually. Let's take this deeper. Imagine the moment after a breakup. You are hit with the weight immediately. Every corner of the room reminds you of them. Every song feels like a knife. Every ordinary moment feels empty. Your instinct is to reconnect, to fix, to close the wound. But for the avoidant, their instinct is opposite. They run not toward the wound, but away from it. They numb, so they don't bleed. And so while you sit with heartbreak in the present, they delay it for the future. But pain delayed is not pain erased. It waits, and when it comes, it does not whisper, it shouts. This silence, this delay, is the first stage of when an avoidant begins to miss you. Not in your time, not in the world's time, but in theirs. And when it begins to surface, it does so in waves they can't ignore. The song that once made them roll their eyes now makes them stop. The restaurant they avoided suddenly feels hollow without you there. The bed they once spread out in freedom feels unbearably empty. The silence they once loved turns into a silence that hurts. But here's the piece almost no one tells you. They don't miss you when you're waiting. They miss you when you've moved, when you stop calling, when you stop chasing, when your world expands without them. Because that is when their silence turns into a mirror, not of who you were, but of what they lost. This is the silence before the ache, the desert before the rain, the numbness before the longing. And while it may feel like you never mattered, know this: the moment they start to miss you is already written in the silence they're keeping. It will come, but it won't come in the way you expect. It won't come with confessions. It won't come with apologies. It will come with flashes, moments that pierce through their wall, reminders they can't control, like they can't silence anymore. And that is the beginning of their missing. The cracks in the wall. Silence can only hold so long. What was buried does not stay buried. And for the avoidant, this is the part they fear the most. Because cracks always come. At first, they are small. So small they can ignore them. A song, a phrase, a smell that pulls you back into the room. They brush it off. They push it down. They tell themselves, don't be weak. Don't go back. You're better off alone. But the mind doesn't obey. The body doesn't obey. Memory has its own pulse, its own rhythm. And eventually, the cracks spread. Here's what no one tells you. The avoidant misses you in fragments. Not all at once. Not in a flood. It comes in flashes. A memory they didn't invite. A longing they didn't expect. A sudden grief in the middle of a normal day. And the more they try to suppress it, the louder it grows. Because what they buried isn't gone. It's alive. And what is alive pushes back. The first cracks often show up in routine. They walk into the same coffee shop, and the barista remembers your order. But you're not there. They watch a show you used to watch together. And suddenly the jokes aren't funny. Because you're not laughing with them. They go to sleep. And for the first time in weeks, they realize how cold the bed feels. The wall trembles. They try to patch the cracks. By working more. By distracting themselves. By telling themselves you were too much. That they made the right choice. But each excuse feels thinner than the last. And when night comes, silence grows heavier. Because distractions don't work in the dark. Here's the paradox. The avoidant doesn't miss you in closeness. They miss you in absence. Not when you were near, but when you were gone. Because while love made them panic, loss makes them ache. They begin to realize the freedom they clung to is empty. The independence they idolized is lonely. And the wall they thought would protect them now feels like a prison. Missing you doesn't begin with romance. It begins with grief. Grief over the things they thought they didn't need. Grief over the safety they didn't recognize. Grief over the parts of themselves they only felt when they were with you. The cracks become windows. Windows where your face appears, where your laughter echoes, where your love is remembered, not as a weight, but as warmth. And for the avoidant, this is terrifying, because now they know. You mattered. You mattered deeply, and the more they denied it, the more undeniable it becomes. Think of it like this. When you were close, their nervous system screamed, too much, too close, too dangerous. But when you are gone, their nervous system whispers, too quiet, too empty, too cold. The cracks turn whispers into echoes, and echoes into longing. But here's the hidden detail. The moment they start to miss you is not always the moment they return, because missing you is not safe for them. Not yet. They may feel the ache, but they don't know what to do with it. So they bury it again. Then it cracks again. Then they bury it again. A cycle of remembering and repressing, of feeling and fleeing. And every time, the cracks grow wider, until one day, they cannot hold back the flood. This stage is messy, contradictory, confusing. They may check your social media, then ghost you if you reach out. They may bring up your name casually to friends, but never message you directly. They may drive past your street, then tell themselves it meant nothing. These are the cracks. Not enough to rebuild, not enough to confess, but enough to reveal. You are still inside them. And for you, this part can be the most painful because you sense it. You feel them hovering in shadows. You notice the likes, the glances, the subtle breadcrumbs, and your heart leaps. You think, they miss me. They're coming back. But the truth is harder. They do miss you. But missing you and returning to you are not the same thing. Because for the avoidant, missing you feels like exposure. It feels like standing too close to fire. So instead of stepping toward you, they hover near the flame, touching it, then pulling away. Over and over, the cracks show their love, but they also show their fear. And this is where many get stuck, waiting for cracks to become doors. But sometimes cracks stay cracks. They never open wider. Because the avoidant must choose, not just to miss you, but to face the fear of closeness itself. And many are not ready. Still, this is the turning point. Because once the cracks appear, once they realize you mattered, they cannot return to numbness fully. They cannot live as if you didn't exist. Because you did. And now, you always will. This stage is also when they often test the waters. A casual message, a random check-in, a memory slipped into conversation. They frame it as nothing. But it's not nothing. It's their way of peeking through the cracks, without tearing the wall down. Because tearing the wall down would mean risking everything, and nothing terrifies them more. But remember this truth. When the avoidance starts to miss you, the cracks are not about you. They are about them, their nervous system, their defenses, their unfinished story. You triggered their ache, but only they can choose what to do with it. So the cracks grow, the pressure builds, and eventually, they must face a decision to keep patching the wall, living with longing they can't erase, or to open it and risk closeness again. This is the moment the missing becomes unbearable, the ache that silence can no longer hold. And when that day comes, everything changes, because the wall that kept them safe is no longer protection, it is punishment, and they will either step through or walk away forever. That is the truth about the cracks. They are not just signs of missing, they are signs of battle. A battle between fear and longing, between freedom and connection, between safety and love. And that battle decides everything. When longing turns into action, missing is one thing, acting is another. For the avoidant, these two are worlds apart, because longing feels dangerous and action feels impossible. But there comes a point when cracks are no longer cracks, when silence is no longer silence, when the ache becomes too heavy to carry alone. That's when the shift happens. It rarely begins with confession. Instead, it begins with testing, with subtle signs, with tiny risks. A like on a post, A quick glance at your story, a late night text that feels casual. They frame it as nothing. But for them, it is everything. Because action, for the avoidant, is not about words, it's about risk. And even the smallest gesture feels like exposure. Here's the hidden truth. When the avoidant starts to act, they are not really reaching out to you. They are reaching out to safety, to see if you are still safe, if you still care, if you will still receive them. Because the deepest fear they carry is not that you are gone, it is that you are gone for good, and their longing cannot survive rejection. So their action is careful, measured, tentative. It looks small to you, but to them, it feels enormous. This is why you might notice contradictions. They miss you, but they act cold. They reach out, but then disappear. They flirt with closeness, then shut it down. It isn't cruelty, it's survival, because every action they take threatens the very wall that has always kept them safe. Imagine carrying a belief for years. Closeness will trap me. Dependence will destroy me. Love will suffocate me. Now imagine missing someone so deeply that you begin to question that belief. That's terrifying. So their actions wobble. Forward, then back. Closer, then further. Not because they don't care, but because caring feels like drowning. When longing turns into action, you may also see another pattern. Indirect messages. They might send a meme, or comment on something unrelated, or bring up a shared memory without context. It's not about the content, it's about the bridge back to you. Because walking directly across that bridge would feel too vulnerable, but inching across, that they can handle. Sometimes their action looks like curiosity. They ask how you're doing, not because they need details, but because they need presence. They want to know, are you still there? Do you still exist in their world? Other times their action looks like confession in disguise. They mention being tired or stressed, hoping you'll hear what they can't say out loud. I miss the comfort you gave me. They talk about how weird things feel, hoping you'll notice the undertone. I feel the gap you left. But here's the paradox. Their actions are real. Their longing is real. But it does not mean they are ready. Because action is not the same as commitment. And reaching out is not the same as returning. For the avoidant, action is an experiment, a test, a way to measure risk. They are not asking themselves, do I love you? They are asking, will I survive loving you? This is why the avoidant often retreats. After the first steps, they send the text, then panic when you reply warmly. They reach out, then vanish again. They make a gesture, then act like it meant nothing. It's not rejection, it's fear, because action exposes them. And exposure awakens old wounds. The wound of being trapped, the wound of being smothered, the wound of being unsafe. So they recoil. But every action plants a seed. Even if they run again, the seed of connection remains. Because now, they know something they can't unknow. That the wall doesn't hold forever. That silence doesn't satisfy. That longing doesn't fade. And so they act again, testing once more, approaching once more, risking once more, until the seed grows strong enough to break through their fear. There is also a hidden layer here. Competition between the old story and the new desire. The old story says, stay safe, stay distant. The new desire whispers, but you miss them, you need them. Every action is a negotiation between these voices, and sometimes the old story wins. Sometimes the new desire does. That's why their behavior looks inconsistent. It's not about you. It's about the tug of war inside them. When longing pushes them to act more boldly, you may see bigger steps. They ask to meet. They bring up deeper topics. They apologize indirectly at first. They may even show jealousy, not because they have a right to, but because the thought of you with someone else cracks their wall open faster than anything else. Here's what no one tells you. The moment they start to miss you deeply, action becomes inevitable because longing is not static. It builds, it presses, it demands release. The avoidant can suppress it for a while, but eventually, it spills over. And when it does, they either reach for you or run even harder. This is the dangerous middle ground because sometimes their action pulls you back in. They give you just enough hope, just enough warmth, just enough closeness, and you think they're finally ready. But they may not be. They may still be caught in the cycle of approach and retreat, of longing and fear. So their action feels like a promise, but it isn't one yet. This is why understanding matters. Their actions reveal their struggle, but they don't guarantee their choice. Because to truly step through the wall, they must not only miss you, they must face themselves, face their story, face their fear, face the part of them that believes love is danger. Until then, their actions will wobble, but the wobble itself is proof. Proof that you mattered, proof that the cracks are real, proof that silence could not erase you. This stage is not about certainty, it's about movement. And movement, no matter how small, is the sign of longing becoming too strong to ignore. The avoidant has started to act, and once action begins, there is no going back to numbness. So the question becomes, will their longing lead them to rebuild, or will their fear drive them further away? That choice is still ahead. But one thing is clear. The moment the avoidant starts to miss you is not just a feeling. It is a turning point. Because missing grows into movement, and movement grows into decision. And that decision changes everything. The decision point, stay distant or come closer. Longing builds pressure, but pressure always seeks release. For the avoidant, this is the moment of reckoning. Because missing you is no longer a quiet ache. It is a demand. It is a call. It is a mirror they cannot avoid. And so they arrive at the decision point. Stay distant or come closer. This is not a casual choice for them. It feels like a life or death decision because both paths feel dangerous. Staying distant means emptiness. It means the silence grows heavier. It means the ache sharpens. But coming closer means risk. It means exposure. It means vulnerability. And vulnerability feels like drowning. For them, both options hurt. The question becomes, which pain can they survive? At this stage, the avoidant often circles. They think about reaching out. They imagine what they'd say. They replay old conversations. Then they panic, shut it down, convince themselves it's safer to stay away. And then, hours or days later, they circle back again. It's not indecision. It's fear colliding with need. A tug of war between survival and desire. Here's the secret most don't see. When the avoidant misses you, their longing isn't just about you. It's about the unfinished story inside them. The story that says, love is unsafe. Closeness will consume me. Dependence equals danger. Yet your absence makes them question it. Because if love is unsafe, why does losing you feel worse? This is why the decision point feels unbearable. Their old belief and their present longing cannot coexist. Something has to give. Some avoidants double down on distance. They run harder. They bury the ache. They tell themselves stories like, you're better off without me. I wasn't made for love. They'll find someone stronger. It sounds like selflessness, but it's fear disguised as nobility. Because if they convince themselves they're protecting you, they don't have to admit. They're just protecting themselves. Others edge closer. But with caution, they send the first text. They ask about your life. They offer fragments of closeness, but it's not yet surrender. It's negotiation. They're not saying, I'm ready. They're saying, can I survive this? Can I trust this? Can I risk this without losing myself? Every small move is a test, not of you, but of their own tolerance for love. The decision point is often where people misunderstand, because from the outside, it looks simple. If you miss me, come back. If you care, show me. But from inside the avoidance nervous system, nothing feels simple. Their body interprets closeness as threat. Their wiring screams for escape. So even when they want to run toward you, their body pulls them away. It isn't a lack of love. It's a war inside them. At this stage, patterns often emerge. One common path, the push-pull cycle. They move closer, then panic, then retreat, then they miss you again, then they return, then they pull away. On the surface, it feels cruel, inconsistent, manipulative even. But beneath the surface, it is survival strategy. They are not playing games. They are negotiating with their fear. And fear is rarely logical. Another path, the sudden leap. For some avoidance, missing you becomes unbearable all at once. The dam breaks, the walls collapse, and instead of small steps, they leap, they confess, they admit, they pour out what they've buried. It feels sudden, but it isn't. It's the result of silent longing, stacking up for weeks or months, until the pressure explodes. But not all leaps last, because confession does not erase fear. Action does not dissolve wiring. The leap may be followed by panic, by second-guessing, by retreat. This is why many reunions with avoidance feel unstable at first, because the moment of decision does not guarantee permanence. It only guarantees exposure, and exposure is terrifying. So how do you know when the avoidant is leaning closer for real? It's in the shift from reaction to choice. Reaction looks like panic-driven action, late-night texts, sudden confessions, jealousy. Choice looks slower, quieter, intentional. It's not about fireworks. It's about consistency. They don't just reach out in a wave of longing. They keep reaching, day after day, because missing has transformed into willingness. The willingness is the true decision point, because longing alone does not rebuild love, and action alone does not sustain it. But willingness does. Willingness to face fear. Willingness to stay when it feels unsafe. Willingness to love even when it feels risky. When the avoidant chooses willingness, you'll notice the difference. They won't just circle. They won't just leap. They will stay, even shakily, even imperfectly, even with fear still in their chest, because they've chosen you, not just their survival. This is the invisible turning point, when missing turns into movement, and movement turns into choice. It rarely comes with dramatic words. It rarely arrives in one single moment, but you'll feel it. The shift from hesitation to leaning in. The shift from testing to building. The shift from fear running the show to love becoming the compass. Here's the hardest truth. Not every avoidant makes that choice. Some stay in the loop of missing and retreating. Some cling to safety over love. Some let the ache consume them, rather than facing the risk of closeness. And that is their decision, not your failure. Because the choice to stay distant or come closer can never belong to you. It is theirs alone. But if they do choose closeness, even imperfectly, even fearfully, even slowly, it is not a small thing. It is monumental. Because for them, choosing love is choosing to rewrite their oldest story. The story that said, love is danger. The story that said, I must run. In choosing to come closer, they defy the very walls that shape their identity. And that is never casual. it is courage. So the decision point is not just about you. It is about them, about whether they are ready to live a different story, to trade distance for closeness, to trade safety for intimacy, to trade fear for love. And that decision changes everything. Because when the avoidant chooses to come closer, the relationship is no longer just longing. It becomes rebuilding. No longer just missing. It becomes creating. No longer just circling. It becomes anchoring. And that is when missing you becomes the doorway back to love. When they finally let themselves love you. This is the moment you never thought would come. After silence, after distance, after nights wondering if you imagined it all, they show up, not just physically, but emotionally, not with half presence, but with something deeper, something truer. They let themselves love you. It rarely looks like a grand gesture. No movie scene confession, no sweeping speech. Instead, it begins quietly, in the way they stay when they would normally run, in the way they answer instead of disappearing, in the way their voice softens when they speak your name. Because for the avoidant, love is not proven in words, it is proven in presence. And presence is the hardest thing they've ever given. Here's what most people don't see. When an avoidant lets themselves love you, it feels like disobedience to their own nervous system. Their body screams, "Protect yourself," but their heart whispers, "Stay." And for the first time, they listen to the whisper over the scream. That is not weakness, that is strength. The kind of strength born from finally realizing that love does not destroy them. Fear does. At this stage, you'll notice the shift. They don't just miss you, they invest. They don't just return, they root. They don't just show up and panic, they stay in intention. This is love, rewired. It doesn't mean fear disappears. Even when they let themselves love you, fear still lingers. It still flickers in their chest. It still whispers old warnings. But here's the difference. They don't obey it anymore. They feel the fear and choose love anyway. That is what real healing looks like. And this is where your role changes too. Because now, the work isn't chasing them. It isn't decoding their distance. It isn't questioning your worth. It is receiving them. It is allowing them to show up, even shakily. It is recognizing that their stumbles are not rejection anymore. They are growing pains. Because love for them is new muscle, and muscles shake before they strengthen. When they finally let themselves love you, the relationship takes on a new texture. It's not perfect. It's not seamless. It's not without triggers. But it is alive. Alive in the way you can speak, without fearing silence as punishment. Alive in the way they reach for your hand, without calculating escape routes. Alive in the way arguments end, not in withdrawal, but in repair. Alive in the way love becomes safe enough to hold both of you fully. You'll see it in the small things. The text they send first thing in the morning, the call they return without delay, the weekend plans they initiate instead of avoid. Love doesn't just appear in declarations. It appears in patterns. And for the avoidant, pattern is everything. Because every consistent act of closeness is proof to themselves. I can do this. I can love. I can stay. But let's be clear. This stage doesn't erase the past. The scars remain. The fears echo. There will still be moments of retreat. Moments when the walls threaten to rise again. Moments when they question if they can really do this. But the difference now is in their return. Because when they finally let themselves love you, the retreat no longer lasts. The silence no longer defines. The fear no longer dictates. They come back quicker. They speak sooner. They stay longer. That is progress. That is love in motion. And this is where healing becomes mutual. Because your patience meets their courage. Your steadiness meets their vulnerability, and together, something new is built. Not anxious pursuit, not avoidant withdrawal, but balanced love. Love that breathes, love that bends, love that holds. For the avoidant, this is the deepest transformation of all. They learn that closeness is not a cage, it is freedom. They learn that dependence is not weakness, it is strength. They learn that love is not a trap, it is home. And when they love you, not in hiding, not in fear, but openly, it is not just about the relationship, it is about rewriting their very identity. And here's the gift: when an avoidant lets themselves love you, you are not just receiving affection, you are witnessing rebirth, a rebirth of someone who has spent their whole life running and who finally decides to stop for you, but also for themselves. So if you ever doubt the depth of their love, remember this: what looks small to you is monumental to them. Every word spoken instead of swallowed, every moment stayed instead of fled, every confession risked instead of buried. These are not just acts of love, they are acts of courage. Because for them, love was always the forbidden thing, and now it is the chosen thing. This is what no one tells you. The moment the avoidant starts to miss you is only the beginning. The real story is the moment they let themselves love you. Because missing you wakes up their longing, but loving you awakens their life. So if you are here, reading these words, and you recognize yourself or someone you love, hold on to this truth. Avoidants do not miss because they are cold. They miss because they are human. And when they finally love, they love with a depth, forged in the fire of fear. It is not shallow. It is not casual. It is not half-hearted. It is hard-won, and it is real. And if you're the one who has waited, who has wondered, who has questioned your worth in their absence, let this be your reminder. You were never unworthy. You were never unlovable. You were never too much. They were simply afraid. Afraid of what love would ask of them. Afraid of what love might take from them. Afraid of what love might reveal in them. But love was not the danger. Fear was. And once they saw that, once they let themselves love you, everything changed. Because in the end, love is not about perfection. It is about presence. Not about never fearing, but about staying, even with fear in the room. And when the avoidant finally chooses that, you will know, not because they say it once, but because they show it every day, in their staying, in their risking, in their loving. And maybe this is the real truth. The moment they miss you proves their heart is alive, but the moment they love you proves their heart is free. If this spoke to you, remember, healing and love are possible, not by forcing, not by chasing, but by creating the kind of love that even fear cannot silence. Because the bravest thing an avoidant can do is not run, it is to love. And the bravest thing you can do is believe that love can be safe for both of you.